sometimes the small vocal minority, on social media who are seeking to divide our country, I think is fundamentally anti-British in terms of our sense of community and identity. And I think we as a party need to be really proud of who we are as a nation, claim that flag, it's our flag, this is our identity as much as it is anybody else's, and not use an approach to...
Phillipson Gaza ceasefire. Before we dive into today's video, if you're passionate about British politics and want to stay ahead of the headlines, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what we're covering. And trust me, this story is absolutely wild. So, here we are again. Another week in British politics, and another cabinet minister has managed to walk themselves straight into what can only be described as a spectacular diplomatic car crash. The kind of car crash that plays out on live television, gets contradicted by a foreign government, and leaves you wondering how someone in such a senior position could get their story so catastrophically wrong. But that's exactly what's happened with Bridget Phillipson, our education secretary, who decided that Sunday morning television was a perfect place to claim Britain had played a key role in brokering the Gaza ceasefire. Spoiler alert, apparently nobody in Israel got that memo. Let's set the scene. The Gaza war has been absolutely devastating. Months of conflict, unimaginable suffering, and then finally, a fragile ceasefire emerges. It's brokered by the Americans, orchestrated by Donald Trump's administration, and suddenly there's genuine hope for a resolution. But instead of simply acknowledging this American success and moving on, Bridget Phillipson decides to venture onto Sky News and claim credit for Britain. She told Trevor Phillips that the UK had been pulling string behind the scenes and had played a crucial role in getting us to this point. It's the kind of claim that sounds impressive, the kind that might boost your standing with domestic audiences, and the kind that gets you absolutely demolished when a foreign government decides to call you out. Within hours, Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell issued a statement that basically amounted to a public smackdown. She said she would have to contradict Phillipson's words. Just let that sink in for a moment. A member of Netanyahu's government felt compelled to directly contradict the UK's education secretary on live television. This isn't a behind-the-scenes diplomatic disagreement. This is public humiliation, and it happened because someone apparently couldn't resist taking credit for something they didn't do. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Haskell didn't stop there. She outlined exactly why the UK's claims are not just wrong but actively counterproductive. According to the Israeli minister, when Britain decided to recognize Palestinian statehood just 2 months ago, during a time when diplomatic teams were actively negotiating around the table, it sent an absolutely catastrophic message to Hamas. The message? The longer you continue this war, the longer you hold out, the more you're going to be rewarded. That's not diplomacy. That's not playing a key role in securing peace. That's shooting yourself in the foot and then wondering why the peace negotiations aren't progressing smoothly. The timing here is absolutely crucial, and this is where Phillipson claims really fall apart under scrutiny. The ceasefire has just been secured, negotiations are finally bearing fruit, and the UK decide to recognize Palestinian statehood as part of a larger coalition that includes France, Australia, and Canada. Now, look, there's a legitimate geopolitical argument for Palestinian statehood recognition. It's a complex issue, one that reasonable people disagree about, and Britain has every right to make its own foreign policy decisions. But claiming that this decision somehow contributed to ending the war, when a leading Israeli government minister is directly telling you that it undermined negotiations and emboldened Hamas to keep fighting. That's not just embarrassing. That's a fundamental misreading of geopolitical reality. Phillipson, when pressed on exactly what Britain's contribution had been, got remarkably vague. She mentioned complex matters of diplomacy and involvement, but when it came to specifics, she pivoted to acknowledging the critical role that the American government played. So we have the UK Education Secretary essentially admitting that America did the heavy lifting while simultaneously claiming that Britain was instrumental in the process. That's not a key role. That's a supporting act that's desperately trying to take a bow at the end of someone else's performance. The broader political context here is deeply uncomfortable for the Keir Starmer government. This administration has been trying to navigate the Israel-Palestine issue with extreme caution. It's one of the most politically volatile foreign policy questions in modern British politics. You've got pro-Israel voices, pro-Palestine voices, pressure from within the Labour Party itself, and international obligations all pulling in different directions. Sir Keir Starmer is now preparing to join other world leaders at a Middle East peace summit, and this controversy, this contradiction from Israel, doesn't put him in a strong position. When your education secretary has just been publicly contradicted by the Israeli government on a matter of fundamental importance, it undermines your credibility. It makes you look like you're either dishonest or incompetent, and in foreign policy, neither of those impressions is recoverable quickly. What's particularly damaging is the substance of what Haskell was saying. She wasn't just contradicting Phillipson for the sake of diplomatic point scoring. She was pointing out that the UK's recognition of Palestinian statehood, while well-intentioned or perhaps politically necessary domestically, actually interfered with ongoing peace negotiations. That's not a position you want to find yourself in as a government. You don't want foreign powers saying your policy decisions actively hinder peace efforts. It undermines everything you claim to stand for on the international stage. There's also something deeply sassy about the way this is played out, isn't there? A senior British cabinet minister goes on live television, makes expansive claims about Britain's role in international diplomacy, and within hours gets publicly contradicted by a foreign government. It's the kind of thing that would be comedic if it weren't so serious. This is real foreign policy, real stakes, real consequences for how Britain is perceived internationally. The narrative that's now being set is one where Britain is either exaggerating its own importance or actively misleading the public about its role in these negotiations. And let's be honest, this matters because it reflects on the entire government's competence. If your education secretary doesn't know what's actually happening in the peace negotiations she's claiming credit for, what does that say about the government's grasp of foreign policy more broadly? It suggests either a lack of communication between different government departments, a fundamental misunderstanding of the geopolitical landscape, or a desperate attempt to score political points that's gone badly wrong. None of those interpretations inspire confidence. The larger question here is whether this moment represents a turning point in how the public and international community perceive the Starmer government's foreign policy credentials. They came to power promising competence and serious governance. They promised that after the chaos and confusion of the Johnson and Truss years, you'd have a government that knew what it was doing on the world stage. But when your education secretary is getting publicly contradicted by the Israeli government over basic facts about British diplomatic involvement, that narrative starts to crack. It's hard to project competence and seriousness when you're caught making claims that don't withstand even basic scrutiny from the people actually involved in the negotiations. What happens next will be fascinating to watch. Will Bridget Phillipson clarify a position? Will the government try to walk back the claim? Will there be a deeper conversation about why the UK made the decision to recognize Palestinian statehood while negotiations were ongoing? Or will this simply be another scandal that gets absorbed into the endless news cycle, another example of government overreach and misjudgment that nobody will remember in 3 weeks' time? That's the brutal reality of modern politics. Sometimes the most humiliating moments become forgotten almost as quickly as they happen. But this is exactly the kind of political drama that UK Connors thrives on, because it tells you so much about what's really happening behind the scenes in British government. This isn't just a story about one cabinet minister embarrassing herself on live television. It's a window into how decisions get made, how international diplomacy actually works, and what happens when domestic political considerations collide with the hard realities of global geopolitics. So what do you think? Did Bridget Phillipson overreach, or was she simply echoing talking points she'd been given? Is the UK's recognition of Palestinian statehood a principled stand, or was it counterproductive diplomacy? The comment section below is absolutely waiting for your take on this. But more importantly, if you want to stay on top of these developments as they unfold, make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors. We'll be breaking down the next chapter of this story the moment it happens, and you won't want to miss it. Subscribe now, and we'll see you on the next one.